So this is an update and a revision of an older video on the history of Lucifer in the Bible. As is the case regarding pretty much all history, all doctrine, all prophecy in the so-called church, it is not from the Bible. So whatever you might have been told about Lucifer in the past, that he was a fallen angel, etc., we have to get rid of all those lies because they're not from the Bible. And if they're not from the Bible, they're not the truth, and therefore they are lies. Okay, so we need to go back into the scriptures, study them for ourselves, and come to a proper understanding of what the Bible is teaching, not what man is teaching. And secondly, I just finished a series of videos on the history of the anointed cherub and the fallen angels, which again is nothing as is generally taught by the so-called church. And if you haven't watched that series, I would recommend that you do. And this is going to be a continuation of the history of evil in the Bible. And this time it'll be focused on this man called Lucifer. Yes, Lucifer was a man. He is not an angel. Yes, he was not the son of Adam. He came before Adam because men have existed a long time before Adam. Flesh and blood have existed a long, long time before Adam, as I have taught in many, over 100 videos on the history of creation in the Bible now. So if you haven't watched any of them, such as the videos on the identity of the sons of God in the Bible, who again are not fallen angels, but they are flesh and blood, then I would recommend that you should watch them. Now, before I continue with the history of Lucifer, I want to quickly emphasize again, this is a very, very difficult understanding for most people, especially those who have been raised in the so-called church, that in the Bible, there is not just one species or one race of creatures that were evil. Generally, we are taught that the evil began in the angels, and it has only evildoers in creation have been these so-called fallen angels. However, the Bible clearly teaches there have been three categories or three races or three different kinds or species of creatures that have all participated in the birth of evil, in the maturing of evil, and the growth of evil in God's creation. It indeed did begin in the race of the angels, who were led by this high creature in God's creation called the anointed cherub. And then he was followed by this Lucifer, who was a man and not an angel. And now the crown of evil has been passed on to Satan, who is neither an angel and who is neither a man. He is a beast. So there are three distinct categories, three distinct ages, three different persons, three different races, three different species, three different kinds that have been the chief princes of evil in the past. One were the angels, one were men who came before Adam, and the final one in this age are the beasts led by the serpent dragon, Satan. So the following is a very short clip from a video I posted recently titled The History of Evil Part 2, Chief Princes of Evil, the Anointed Cherub, the Man Lucifer, and the beast Satan. If you haven't watched it, I would recommend that you watch that first. The two notable intelligent species or kind of creatures that God created in the beginning were the various races of angels, who are ethereal spirit beings, and the sons of God, who are corporeal creatures of flesh. Various species of beasts were also created, who also inhabited the heavenly celestial realms and here on the earth. Each category of creatures, angel, man, and beast, have been the chief rulers of evil in the various ages of evil. The golden age ended in Ezekiel 28:15, when iniquity or evil was first discovered in the anointed cherub, who was a high-ranking angelic being and who was most likely second in command to God himself. Thus began the post-evil ages of creation, which have lasted into the present day and will continue until the day of judgment in Revelation chapter 20. The ages that began once evil entered God's creation have three prominent divisions of time, in which three prominent chief princes of evil have wielded their power: one an angel, one a man, and one a beast. The first one, the anointed cherub, was an angel. He is the father of evil in God's creation. He was followed by Lucifer, who was a man, who dethroned the anointed cherub to assume the crown of evil. And today, in the present time, after Lucifer has appeared on the scene, Satan, who is a serpent, dragon, beast, and he is the present day prince of evil and of darkness. Although it is commonly taught that the anointed cherub, Lucifer, and Satan are all the same creature, that they all had their origin as an angel and then they turned into this monster dragon beast. Okay, but this is not true biblically. These are three distinct and separate individual creatures who operated in different ages of time, and neither are they all the same species or same kind. Only the anointed cherub was an angelic being, whereas Lucifer was a flesh and blood man, and Satan is a serpentine dragon beast. Okay, and so the history of creation, especially the history of evil, is spread out over a lengthy period of time, and it has been forwarded. The origin of evil, the birth of evil, then its growth and maturity have occurred in different ages of time through different persons and different creatures. And the most prominent one of these, of each one of these evil ages, has been the anointed cherub in the Silver Age, Lucifer in the Bronze Age, and Satan in the present Iron Age. So let us now continue to study the history of Lucifer in the Bronze Age.
How art thou fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning? How art thou cut down to the ground, which didst weaken the nations? For thou hast said in thine heart, I will ascend into heaven. I will exalt my throne above the stars of God. I will sit also upon the mount of the congregation in the sides of the north. I will ascend above the heights of the clouds. I will be like the Most High. Yet thou shalt be brought down to hell, to the sides of the pit. They that see thee shall narrowly look upon thee and consider thee, saying, Is this the man that made the earth to tremble, that did shake kingdoms? Is this the man that made the earth to tremble, that did shake kingdoms? Is this the man that made the earth to tremble, that did shake kingdoms?
The history of creation since the beginning can be divided into four, actually about 4.5 ages. I'll speak about that other half age, which is the age which basically did not last that long, but that was the time before the flood of Noah, between the creation of Adam and the flood of Noah. In mythology, this was called the Age of Heroes. I've not really spoken about it much at all in this series so far, but I will get to it because it is also a significant little age in which many things did happen. So in Genesis 6:4, we read that the offspring of the sons of God and the daughters of men were mighty men. Okay, these mighty men are basically the heroes of Greek mythology, such as Hercules. Okay, they were born. Their fathers were the sons of God, celestial men like Lucifer, and their mothers were the daughters or the daughters of Adam. And they were mighty because they were genetically superior and they had superior technology. In this vein, Lucifer was a son of God, of the races of men that came before Adam. They are genetically similar to the children of Adam, to Adam and his children, but they're also superior in that they seem to have better physical genetics and long life, and they also had much better technology. So Lucifer was one of these mighty men, but not from the race of Adam, one of those mighty men who thought to be gods in this world and were worshipped as gods and still are in many ways to this very day. Lucifer was one such mighty man who are called sons of God in the Bible, who lived before Adam, and he is the one who turned the earth into a wilderness, into a wasteland, as it is written in Genesis 6:2, that the earth became without form and void, and darkness was upon the deep. And this was as a result of the wars and the destruction that was caused by Lucifer and by his follower, namely Satan. But the major ages, the major divisions are classified according to the names of precious and base metals. The first age is called the Golden Age. The second one is the Silver Age. I've covered the gold and the silver so far, And now this will be an introduction to the Bronze Age, because the Bronze Age is the one that we are closest, closely connected to. And the history of the Bronze Age perhaps is more readily known as it is in the pages of the Bible and also in mythologies, because most of these mythologies, they are the history of the Bronze Ages, not so much of the Gold and the Silver Age. So there's a great deal more information that is available, and a lot of things that you will begin to make sense, such as, where do the stories of mythology come from? Where did all these massive ruins, like the ones in South America or in Asia or in Africa or basically anywhere in the world, where did who were the people that made all these worlds, and why? And where did they come from, and what happened to them? So we will gain an understanding of all that. That each one of these ages, they have some a defining character. Above all is God. I mean, all the ages, all history is literally His story. But other than God, there are some major personages who are significant in each age. In the Gold Age and the Silver Age, it was the anointed cherub of Ezekiel 28. And I have begun this video with the brief story of Lucifer, not his complete story, as recorded in the pages of Isaiah chapter 14. And the Bronze Age, I would say, belonged mostly to Lucifer, and therefore it is now time to study his story and see like what role he has played in the growth of evil to bring the world to the place where it is, so that when we got to Genesis chapter 1 verse 2, it says darkness was upon the face of the deep. This darkness was not something that God had made. This darkness came about as a result of judgment upon an evil world that existed before them. And the primary person in that age who brought about this judgment because of his evil was Lucifer. Okay, and the Bronze Age will also introduce us to Satan. So these are the two very, very prominent creatures who have played a role back then, and they are still playing a role in this world today. At least Satan is, and therefore we will now understand, what happened and why it happened in that age just that went by, I don't know how long ago, but not as far back in time as the Gold or the Silver Age. Now, how do we know that Genesis chapter 1 verse 1 is an age and not just an instantaneous event? In Job chapter 38, we can read about the time when God laid the foundations of the earth. So, at that time, there is something very interesting that is noted in that passage, that the morning stars sang together, and the sons of God shouted for joy. So between the creation of the heaven and the earth, we find that there are these morning stars, which are angelic beings, and the sons of God, which are flesh and blood creatures. They are, singing together, and they are shouting for joy. So now, what we learn from that is that in between that time period of the creation of the heaven and the earth, God, at some point in time, created these intelligent beings before He created the earth. These are false doctrines, false teachings that these sons of God of Genesis chapter 6 were angels. They were not angels. They were these sons of God, were flesh and blood creatures that God had created in the very beginning and given them the earth. And these are the creatures, some of them, who turned against God and eventually against these angels whom they had initially followed, and they warred with them, and they defeated them, and they imprisoned them in hell, of course, to fulfill the purposes of God. And that is how we got through the first two ages of creation, the Golden Age and the Silver Age. And now let's look at the next most prominent person in the story of the ages of creation in the Bronze Age. Like he existed in the Silver Age, of course, but he is the one that when we went from the Silver Age to the Bronze Age was the chief of these masters of evil, and his name is Lucifer. I would like to begin by doing a comparison between the story of the anointed cherub, as recorded, who was an angelic being, as recorded in Ezekiel chapter 28, and the story of Lucifer, who is clearly said in Isaiah 14 to be a man, and the differences between them to come to the conclusion that just as these are not one and the same person, that their story and the events that are associated with their history, they do not belong to the same time period, they belong in different ages. That is why there is so much confusion on this topic, because we are dealing with three different and distinct persons and personalities that existed in three distinct and different ages: the Gold Age, the Silver Age, and the Bronze Age. Now, let me just quickly do a study of Isaiah 14 and Ezekiel 28 in this introduction to the Bronze Age. That's all I'm going to do, is to show you the differences between the anointed cherub of Ezekiel 28 and Lucifer of Isaiah 14, for to prove to you that these are not the same beings. And just as they are not the same beings, nor are their activities occurring at the same time in the same age. So, in order to understand the difference between the angelic being called the anointed cherub in Ezekiel 28 and between Lucifer, we need to understand what is a cherub. In the Bible, the word cherub is in the Strong's Concordance is Hebrew H3742, and the word means a masculine noun of uncertain derivation, meaning an angelic being. Okay. So what I want to stress here is that this creature is clearly identified as an angelic being, but not just an angelic being. He is just not called a cherub. He is called an anointed cherub. And the word anointed is essentially a process by which somebody is sanctified for the service of God. Okay. So that is a creature that has been set apart, whether it's a man, like Aaron, the priest, for set apart for the priesthood in the desert under Moses. So too, this anointed cherub, this cherub was anointed to serve a special function, and he held a special place in God's creation. Okay, a masculine noun of uncertain derivation, meaning an angelic being. It is commonly translated as cherub, plural cherubim. The Bible provides scant details concerning the likeness of these winged creatures, except for the apocalyptic visions of Ezekiel in Ezekiel chapter 10. However, current pictures of cherubim as chubby infants with wings or as feminine creatures finds no scriptural basis. The Bible portrays cherubims as the guardians of the Garden of Eden, and seemingly the glory of the Lord, as flanking the throne of God. This is an important understanding about these creatures when it says as flanking the throne of God. For example, in Psalm 99 verse 1 we read, "The Lord reigns, let the people tremble. He sits between the cherubims, let the earth be moved." Okay? The point is that these creatures, the cherubims, are always found in close proximity to God himself. Okay? They are in heaven with God, and they are in every place that God dwells. So this will tell us this is quite different from the story of Lucifer. So what I'll begin by doing is a quick study of Ezekiel chapter 28, right from verse 1, not beginning in verse 12, but right from verse 1 through to verse 19. Okay, verse 1 says, "The word of the Lord came again unto me, saying," this is the prophet Ezekiel speaking, "Son of man, say unto the prince of Tyrus." See, this again a reference to the prince of Tyrus. This chapter, of course, up from verse 1 to verse 19, it is also telling us the story of the anointed cherub and the origins of evil, although it is being compared to the story of the king of Tyrus, who was a man that existed in those days of Ezekiel. The deeper understanding here is that it is actually referring not just to the evil of this one man, but to the story of evil itself as it happened in the race of the angels led by the anointed cherub. So when it says, "Son of man, say unto the prince of Tyrus," the prince is a reference to principalities. Like I said, the cherub was an anointed cherub. He was a prince. He had been given this position. He had been given this title. This is where we get the word principalities that we read about in Ephesians chapter 6, for examples. We wrestle not against flesh and blood, against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers. These principalities and powers, they have regions that they rule over or that they have been given charge of. And that is where the word principality comes from. So this reference to this person in Tyrus as a prince, it is not just speaking about this one man who was the king at that time. It is also referring to the heavenly principalities that are led by spirit creatures such as this anointed cherub. Thus saith the Lord God, because thine heart is lifted up, and thou hast said, I am a God, I sit in the seat of God, in the midst of the seas, yet thou art a man, and not God, though thou hast set thy heart as the heart of God. In this one verse of scripture, we see God telling us that this creature, this person, this king, who symbolized the anointed cherub, he thinks of himself as God. It is mentioned 4 times. I am a God. I sit in the seat of God. You are not God, though you have set their heart as God. This again is not true of Lucifer, because Lucifer desired to be like the Most High, whereas we are being told that this creature, being in the presence of God, being a close companion of God, he already began to think of himself as God. His majesty, his royalty, it was more comparable to God than any other creature that has ever existed. Not so in the case of Lucifer. Lucifer was very much on the earth, where he had a throne. He was ruling from the earth, from which he wanted to ascend up into heaven, whereas this creature is already in heaven, and being with God, he began to think himself of as God. Behold, thou art wiser than Daniel. There is no secret that they can hide from thee. And again, this speaks to the knowledge. When it says that heart was lifted up, we'll read later on, it is because he had so much knowledge and understanding, that God said he was wiser than Daniel the prophet. And again, keep in mind, yes, though this is for the moment, up until verse 11, telling us the story, God, the direct reference is to a person, a real flesh and blood person, the king of Tyre. But the indirect and the greater understanding is that whatever is being said in regards to this king also applies to the anointed cherub. This is the reason why this anointed cherub story is told in this very same chapter, because whatever applies to this king, the man, also applied to that angel, the angelic being, the anointed cherub. Behold, thou art wiser than Daniel. There is no secret that they can hide from thee. With thy wisdom and with thine understanding thou hast gotten thee riches. See, when I've been doing this series, and this is part 5, in one of those parts where I told the story of this anointed cherub originally, and I said he was the originator of money, and the father of it, some guy wrote, ha ha ha, yeah, this you are right, like mocking me that that this is not the case. But what do we read in here in this entire chapter? This is a chapter about money. What does that say? With thy wisdom and with thine understanding, thou hast gotten thee what? Riches, and has gotten gold and silver, which is what? Money, into thy treasures. What kind of treasures? Monetary treasures. By thy great wisdom and by thy traffic. What is traffic? And I don't want to go into detail here because we already have covered this. It is merchandising, it is selling, it is commerce. This is what what we see in our daily activity. What do people do every day? They buy and they sell. By thy great wisdom and by thy traffic thou hast increased thy what? Riches. Again, money. And thine heart is lifted up because of thy riches. So this is applicable to the king of Tyre, who was the richest man at that time, but it definitely also applies to the anointed cherub, who actually created the system of money. He created money itself, and he created all the systems that govern life to this very day. Okay, this whole system of commerce, which is going to be destroyed in Revelation chapter 18, just before the return of Jesus Christ, it began way back then. Therefore, thus saith the Lord God, because thou hast set thine heart as the heart of God. This Lucifer did not do. Lucifer wanted to get there. This angel was already there. Therefore, thus saith the Lord God, because thou hast set thine heart as the heart of God. Behold, therefore I will bring strangers upon thee, the terrible of the nations. And again we shall see here that Lucifer was the leader of the nations, and he basically governed the whole earth in his time. And he is that stranger that God used to bring him upon this angel. Lucifer is the person that God used, just like God used Alexander the Great and these other conquerors to destroy this king of Tyre. It is the same thing that happened in those ages at the end of the Silver Age. This war came about between Lucifer, who was on the earth, and between these angelic beings who were up in the heavens led by this anointed cherub. And at the end of this, as prophesied here, that angel and his race that followed him, they were all imprisoned in hell because as a result of losing these wars, which of course was something that God had planned and purposed a long time before they ever came into existence. Behold, therefore, I will bring strangers upon thee, the terrible of the nations. And this terrible of the nations was Alexander. And also, in the greater understanding of the history of the ages, this terrible of the nations is the person Lucifer. And they shall draw their swords against the beauty of thy wisdom, and they shall defile thy brightness. They shall bring thee down to the pit, and you shall die the deaths of them that are slain in the midst of the seas. Will you yet say before him that slayeth thee, I am God? But you shall be a man, and no God in the hand of him that slayeth thee. This, of course, is again referring to the man, the king of Tyre, and not necessarily to the anointed cherub who suffered the same fate, that he was destroyed, but of course, not as a man. You shall die the deaths of the uncircumcised by the hand of strangers, for I have spoken it, said the Lord God. So again, God, this is something we can learn something very true here all through biblical history. God uses one group, one nation, one ethnicity against another. They're both evil, but God will use one against the other to judge them both. And this is what happened in the case of Lucifer and in the case of the angels. God set them against each other. And of course, one group destroyed the other, which was the Luciferians. They destroyed this angelic race by defeating them. And this is the story told in mythology in a twisted way of the Olympian gods defeating the Titans. Okay, in mythology, especially in Greek mythology, are told stories of the wars of the gods. First of all, there are generations of gods, that these gods did not have a simultaneous, they did not come into existence simultaneously. There was first the Titans, who, in my opinion, are the cherubim and the various races of angels who were the first evildoers in God's creation. They were followed by these so-called Olympians, who would be the sons of God in the Bible, who are not like the angelic beings, but they are more flesh and blood, and they were domiciled here on the earth, okay? And Lucifer was the most prominent one of them. And these, again, their existence, it came at different times, in different ages, which is why it proves that this is some circumstantial evidence, you could say, that these events, they did occur, and they are told in fictionalized and in corrupted manner in mythology. Mythology is a form of history, although it is not to be trusted, because these stories, as I'll play this little clip, this is not what happened. These wars did happen between the angels and these sons of God, men, etc., but they were highly technological wars. They were more like Star Wars, not like the way they presented in these in Greek mythology, etc. But we do learn from that about the various ages of time, about the various types of creatures who are not all the same, and that they did have wars. And these wars literally did melt the earth. And, the evidence of all that can be seen all across the earth, even unto this very day. So these wars, they did occur. These so-called gods are real. And these ages of time that have gone by in the past are also a history which is not taught to us, not even by so-called Bible scholars.
The Titanomachy, otherwise known as the War of the Titans, was a 10-year war fought through a series of battles between the Titans and the younger Olympian gods, with each side fighting for dominion over the universe. So, what started this legendary war, and who won? Let's find out together right now.
After releasing his relatives from the stomach of Titan Cronus, Zeus guided his brothers to the top of Mount Olympus, the highest mountain in Greece. It was there that the headquarters of the rebel gods would be established, who would fight against the tyranny of the Titans. This rebellion gave rise to the Titanomachy, better known as the War of the Titans. On his throne on Mount Othrys, Cronus summoned all his Titan allies to the great battle. The general of Cronus's army was the Titan Atlas, who would lead the attacks against the Olympic gods.
So what we can learn from these stories about, these wars and these creatures that existed back in the days, and that in that world they still had a hierarchical structure, and you hear about these talks about these generals and of course leaders of these armies. So when we speak about the Inoni Cherub being the first prince of evil, he was not alone. Like, he had a whole host and a whole army. So there were other powerful angels and other creatures that were serving him, but they were numbers. The numbers of them must have been truly vast. And same thing applies to these sons of God men, these so-called gods of mythology. They too were numbered in great numbers, and Zeus or Lucifer might have been the leader, but there were many others that were with him, and they too had a hierarchical structure. That's where the words principalities and powers and dominions, etc., that are spoken about in the Bible comes from. That they have princes, they have lords, they have barons, they have generals, they have armies. That's how this world that have gone by, that's how they existed. Very much like our world today is patterned the same way, that there is a hierarchical structure, there is a leader, and then who is not alone in doing everything that he does. There's of course they have advisors, they have princes, they have other like there may be a CEO, but there'll be like presidents, vice presidents, etc., in any corporation that actually run the organization and manage it. That is exactly how it was back in those days. So when we speak about these chief princes of evil, we also have to understand that they had kingdoms, they had servants, they had soldiers, they had armies, and it was the number of whom is truly staggering, that we can't even begin to take a guess as to how big those worlds were, and how many of these evil creatures that turned against God, how great was their number, and how great was the destruction that they brought about in creation, so that by the time we get to Genesis chapter 1 verse 2, everything, even the heavens themselves, the lights had been turned off, the cosmos had been destroyed, and the earth had been destroyed. So what these events of past history, they are much we can't even begin to fathom as to how destructive they have been in the past, but they have been almost creation destroying power was applied back in those days.
The battle between the gods and the Titans lasted almost 10 years, full of intense hand-to-hand combat, and the scale seemed to tip to the side of the Titans. Zeus decided to free the fearsome Hecatoncheires of Tartarus, giants with 100 arms and 50 heads. The Titans were subdued and punished exemplarily. Cronus and his allies were condemned to a perpetual existence in Tartarus, the Hecatoncheires assuming the role of jailers.
So that same word, Tartarus or Tartaru, is used in the Bible as well. In 2 Peter 2, chapter 2, verse 4, that these angels that sinned against God, that rebelled against God, are now locked away in Tartarus, which is the lowest section of hell, awaiting the day of judgment. So, the difference between what's the story told in mythology is that in mythology, the credit is not given to God, that, all that happened as a result of God's judgment, that, there was no possible way that these angels could have been defeated by these sons of God men because of their technological prowess and their other knowledge, because the anointed cherub himself was called full of wisdom by God. But it is because God judged them and he weakened them that these Luciferian or sons of God races were able to overcome them and eventually to imprison them. One of the other interesting parts of this story is that the dragon, there was a dragon that was allegedly guarding Tartarus to keep these angels in prison, And it seems like that is the origin of Satan, that he was actually created to be like the prisoner or the warden of hell. Okay, so there's so much that can be learned from these stories. It is just that is all confirms the information that is in the Bible, that it really blows my mind. I wish I had more time to analyze these, to teach on these in greater detail, and God willing, one day I will. But let's continue with the story of Lucifer now. God used Alexander the Great and these other conquerors to destroy this king of Tyre. It is the same thing that happened in those ages. At the end of the Silver Age, this war came about between Lucifer, who was on the earth, and between these angelic beings who were up in the heavens, led by this anointed cherub. And at the end of this, as prophesied here, that angel and his race that followed him, they were all imprisoned in hell, because as a result of losing these wars, which of course was something that God had planned and purposed a long time before they ever came into existence. Behold, therefore, I will bring strangers upon thee, the terrible of the nations. And this terrible of the nations was Alexander, and also in the greater understanding of the history of the ages, this terrible of the nations is the person Lucifer. And they shall draw their swords against the beauty of thy wisdom, and they shall defile thy brightness. They shall bring thee down to the pit, and you shall die the deaths of them that are slain in the midst of the seas. Will you yet say before him that slayeth thee, I am God? But you shall be a man, and no God in the hand of him that slayeth thee. This, of course, is again referring to the man, the king of Tyre, and not necessarily to the anointed cherub, who suffered the same fate, that he was destroyed, but of course, not as a man. You shall die the deaths of the uncircumcised by the hand of strangers, for I have spoken it, said the Lord God. So again, God, this is something we can learn something very true here, all through biblical history. God uses one group, one nation, one ethnicity against another. They're both evil, but God will use one against the other to judge them both. And this is what happened in the case of Lucifer and in the case of the angels. God set them against each other. And of course, one group destroyed the other, which was the Luciferians. They destroyed this angelic race by defeating them. And this is the story told in mythology in a twisted way of the Olympian gods defeating the Titans. Moreover, the word of the Lord came unto me. This is verse 11. From here, where we see the moreover the word of the Lord. This is now going to transition this story. This story is going to be expanded about the judgment of the king of Tyre into the judgment of the anointed cherub, who is the father of evil. But those parallels that we are going to see between them is that just as the king of Tyre, he was not described as a conqueror or as a military leader as Lucifer is in Isaiah 14. He is shown to be an industrialist, a corporate head, a banker, a businessman, one who is in the business of making money. Okay, his closest association to what he is, the word that most closely identifies him, is the word money. And that is true of this anointed cherub as well, because he is the originator of money and the systems of economics and commerce that we use on this earth till this very day, and probably in the heavens as well somewhere. Moreover, the word of the Lord came unto me, saying, Son of man, take up a lamentation upon the king of Tyre, and say unto him, Thus saith the Lord God. And from this moment on, this is going to be the story of this anointed cherub right into verse 19. Thou sealest up the sum, full of wisdom and perfect in beauty. Again, these adjectives that are used to describe him, then none of these are applicable to Lucifer, because he wanted to be like this. He desired to be what this angel was. And before he could get there, he had to get this angel out of the way. And that is what happened with these wars of these angels and men. Son of man, take up, this is verse 12, take up a lamentation upon the king of Tyre, and say unto him, Thus saith the Lord God, thou seal up the sum, full of wisdom and perfect in beauty. Thou hast been in Eden, the garden of God. And again, this Eden is not on the earth. This Eden is the garden of God in heaven. And as I told you before, from the very definition, these cherubim are creatures that are closely always found in close proximity to God, and there was none that was closer to God than the anointed cherub himself. Thou hast been in Eden, the garden of God. Every precious stone was thy covering, the sardius, topaz, and the diamond, the beryl, the onyx, and the jasper, the sapphire, the emerald, and the carbuncle, and gold. Gold, in that Lord of the Rings, the Hobbit movie in particular, those of you have seen it, there was that dragon, which of course is symbolic of Satan. What was he sitting on? What was he guarding? He was sitting on gold. Okay? So this association of evil with money and gold and treasure, it is a very ancient one, and it begins with this anointed cherub. And gold, the workmanship of thy tabrets and of thy pipes was prepared in the day that thou wast created. Thou art the anointed cherub that covers. So they're here. He is identified. This creature is clearly identified as an angelic cherubim. He is not a man, okay? And he is not on earth. He is with God, because that's where cherubim are. They are in the presence of God. God is, Psalm 91 tells us, dwells between the cherubim. Thou art that anointed cherub that covers, and I have set thee so. Thou was upon the holy mountain of God. And again, this holy mountain is not a place like Mount Sinai or Mount Zion on earth. This is again a place which is in the heavenly realms, which is called the holy mountain of God. Everything that exists on earth is patterned after something that exists in the heaven. And that's where those Masons, they get that saying, as above, so below. That's why, because there's a truth in that it is a patterning. Things on earth are a pattern of something that exists up there. List of the Garden of Eden that was on the earth was patterned after the Garden of Eden that exists in heaven. And so about this holy mountain. And we shall read about this mountain, that this is the mountain that Lucifer wanted to get to, whereas this anointed cherub is already on this mountain. And I have set thee so, thou was upon the holy mountain of God, thou was walking up and down in the midst of the stones of fire. And this is the origin of evil right here in God's creation. Ezekiel chapter 28, verse 15. Thou was perfect in thy ways from the day that thou was created till iniquity was found in thee. And that day came, that's when that golden age came to an end, and the world creation entered the silver age, where decay and degeneration and destruction became the norm rather than the exception, whereas none of those things had happened before in the golden age. By the multitude of thy merchandise, and again this association with money, with merchandising, with buying, selling, banking, all these are right here in this chapter. By the multitude of thy merchandise they have filled the midst of thee with violence, and thou hast sinned. Therefore I will cast thee as profane out of the mountain of God. And again, I repeat, that Lucifer wanted to get to this mountain and sit on there, whereas this creature is already there. I will cast thee as profane out of the mountain of God, and I will destroy thee, O covering cherub, from the midst of the stones of fire. I don't know what these stones of fire are, man. It sounds so. Would love to see them one of these days. Thine heart was lifted up because of thy beauty. Thou hast corrupted thy wisdom by reason of thy brightness. And again, this brightness is not just in a physical light. It is speaking about his intellect, his knowledge, his understanding, his wisdom. Just God said, thou art wiser than Daniel. I will cast thee to the ground. I will lay thee before kings, that they may behold thee. Now again, as we shall see in the descriptions of Lucifer, who is taught about worms are going to eat, him. Worms are only eat bodies, somebody that is physical, not like as in this case, none of those descriptions that I talked about Lucifer in Isaiah 14 is how this creature came to be destroyed. And that is not the same here. That is again these differences, that he was with God in heaven. He was on the holy mountain of God. He was in close proximity with God. He was brighter, more intelligent. He had more power. He had already had all the things. He had already set his heart like God, that he had already come to a place where he thought that he was the equal of God, whereas Lucifer wanted to become what this creature was. He was the role model for Lucifer. And as God does, he will take, there are no, what do they say? There's no honor among thieves. Yeah, that's it. So that's what these were. They were all thieves, and they had no honor among themselves. That's why they set against each other at the end of the Silver Age. And that is when Lucifer destroyed, he defeated these angelic host and this evil angelic host, and they were locked away in hell. And that's what brought that silver age to an end, when the race of angels that sinned was no longer free to spread their evil in God's creation. That's how we got from the silver age to the bronze age. And that bronze age, of course, the chief person, the chief ruler of that evil of that age was Lucifer. Thine heart was lifted up because thy beauty, thou hast corrupted thy wisdom by reason of thy brightness. I will cast thee to the ground. I will lay thee before kings that they may behold thee. Thou hast defiled thy sanctuaries. And again, I've already talked about this, when in addition to having all this system of money and commerce that he invented, he also introduced idol worship, worshiping of creation rather than the creature. That's what this reference to sanctuaries is. Thou hast defiled thy sanctuaries. And this is what Lucifer wanted. He wanted to be worshipped, just like this creature was being worshipped. He said, if he is, why can't I be? If he had, because Lucifer had learned from this creature, he had acquired power, he had acquired, knowledge, and therefore he wanted also the position that was held by this anointed cherub. That's why they are not one and the same person. Thou hast defiled thy sanctuaries by the multitude of thine iniquities, by the iniquity of thy traffic. Therefore will I bring a fire from the midst of thee. Whereas it is told that the fire that'll destroy him would come from within himself, which is again, in mythology, being a read about the story of the phoenix bird, which is very well, that phoenix, by the way, is very revered. Like, when you say that it's the eagle, that is the seal of the United States, or that it is not an eagle, it's actually a phoenix bird. It is now only been disguised as an eagle, but it isn't. Even in Russia, they have the phoenix. And all those, all countries around the world, they hold the phoenix to be in great reverence. Okay, but that's because it harkens back to the time of this anointed cherub. That's where he began to distribute power to and wealth and riches to those who followed him, and since then they began to worship him, and that's where the sanctuaries came from. And that is happening today. When you're looking at the seal of the eagle and everything else, that is an evil symbol. It is symbolizing this anointed cherub. Okay. I will bring a fire from the midst of thee, and I will bring thee, it shall devour thee, and I will bring thee to ashes upon the earth in the sight of all them that behold thee. See, he was brought down in ashes, whereas Lucifer's fate was quite different. And this is why it's important to delve deep into the words that are plainly written on the pages of the Bible. We need to read them and not read into them, because when we read the stories as they are told and we begin to compare them, then we begin to understand, okay, this can't possibly be speaking about the same person. And verse 19, all that they know thee among the people shall be astonished at thee. Thou shalt be a terror, and never shalt thou be any more. And that has already come to pass. Never will this anointed cherub ever infect God's creation with his evil anymore. So that, my friends, is the story of the anointed cherub. And now we're going to study the story of Lucifer, and we shall see the difference between these two great fathers of evil, the grandfather and the father of evil. And then we shall get to the story of who Satan is and where he came from. These, of course, were both created by God, the anointed cherub and Lucifer. But I believe that is not true in the case of Satan. Okay, so now let's read the story of Lucifer as we read it in Isaiah chapter 14, and compare it to the story of the anointed cherub as we read in Ezekiel chapter 28, which I have just covered. And once again, people, when they talk about Lucifer, they generally begin this at Isaiah chapter 14, verse 12. But I would like to read this from the beginning of this chapter. So what we will notice here is, first of all, that Lucifer is compared to the king of Babylon, as the anointed cherub was compared to the king of Tyrus. And what we read in the story of the anointed cherub was riches, gold, silver, treasures, merchandising, trafficking, commerce, buying, selling. Okay? So he was clearly referred to as a merchant banker, let's say, rather than as a warrior king. As opposed to the king of Tyre, the king Nebuchadnezzar, or the king of Babylon, to which Lucifer is compared, He was a conqueror. He was a warrior. And more than that, he was an absolute ruler. And that is a major difference between them, that the comparison of these is done to two different persons who are quite different in their character and in their exercise of power. Whereas the anointed cherub exercised power through the use of control of money and through the control through having himself worshipped as God, because in Tyrus the king is, we read that in Ezekiel 28, that this person thought, I am a God. And that is exactly what the anointed cherub thought. But we shall see in the story of Lucifer that first and foremost, he was, like the king of Babylon, a conqueror, and he had conquered the nations. It tells us clearly that he ruled the nations, not just a nation. He was not just any king ruling a minor kingdom. No, he was basically the king of the whole earth. And secondly, there is no mention in here about money, gold, silver, treasures. No, his desire, he is shown to be a powerful conquering king, something like Alexander the Great in that vein. Okay, so those are differences between these two right off the bat. But there are other significant differences. Whereas the anointed cherub is clearly identified as a cherub, as a class of angels, as an angelic spirit being. In the case of Lucifer, we shall see he is clearly identified as a man. He is called a man. Okay, the word of God is perfect. So if he wants to call somebody a man, that means a man. If he wants to call somebody an angel, he calls an angel. And that again goes back to Genesis chapter 6, where everybody keeps saying, or the sons of God, the Beni Elohim, were angels. No, the word for angel is malach in Hebrew. Again, it's used hundreds of times. So why would God suddenly change that to, Beni Elohim? And then turn around and tell us, he's never called any angel a son. So these are the things we have to take into consideration. We have to look at the whole picture. We have to compare scripture with scripture. We have to go deep into it. We have to analyze, to think about these things before we draw conclusions. And the only conclusion that we can draw from Isaiah 14 is that Lucifer was a man. Okay, let's begin reading in verse 1. For the Lord will have mercy on Jacob and will yet choose Israel and set them in their own land. And the strangers shall be joined with them, and they shall cleave to the house of Jacob. And the people shall take them and bring them to their place, and the house of Israel shall possess them in the land of the Lord for servants and handmaids. And they shall take them captives, whose captives they were, and they shall rule over their oppressors. And the people shall take them and bring them to their own place, and house of Israel shall possess them in the land of the Lord for servants and handmaids. And they shall take them captives, whose captives they were, and they shall rule over their oppressors. And it shall come to pass in the day that the Lord shall give them rest from thy sorrow. It shall come to pass in the day that the Lord shall give thee rest from thy sorrow, and from thy fear, and from the hard bondage wherein thou was made to serve. See, what is he talking about here? That this Lucifer, because we comparing the king of Babylon to Lucifer, what was he? He was like a slave driver, like Pharaoh in Egypt. Thou shalt take up this proverb against the king of Babylon and say, how has the oppressor ceased? The golden city ceased. The Lord has broken the staff of the wicked and the scepter of the rulers. He who smote the people in wrath with a continual stroke. The word is tyrant, okay? This Lucifer was a tyrant, as we shall see in a minute. The Lord has broken the staff of the wicked and the scepter of the rulers. He who smote the people in wrath with a continual stroke. He that ruled the nations in anger is persecuted and none hinders. And again, you read that term there, he that ruled the nations in anger. See what it says? He that ruled the nations. It's a plural. So it was not just a single nation or a single kingdom. This is speaking about a person who literally controlled all of the nations of the earth. He who smote the people in wrath with a continual stroke, he that ruled the nations in anger is persecuted and none hinders. The whole earth is his rest and is quiet. They break forth into singing. Why do they break forth into singing? Let's just take a look at what would be the reason that they broke forth into singing. Yea, the fir trees rejoice at thee, and the cedars of Lebanon, saying, Since thou art laid down, no feller is come up against us. This word feller is also a meaning of the word giant or Nephilim as used in Genesis chapter 6, verse 4. So was this Lucifer of the race of giants? I don't know. I can't say for sure. He might have been. But that word feller is definitely one of the meanings, as I have shown in some of my previous videos. The one particularly that I did on the Nephilim, that's one of the meanings of the word giant in or Nephilim in Genesis 6:4 is the word feller, and that word is used of Lucifer here. So what does that mean? The king of Babylon, who and Lucifer, he's the king of Babylon, symbolic of Lucifer. So yes, what applies to the king of Babylon applies to Lucifer as well. So what we have learned so far is that he is shown to be a destroyer, a tyrant ruler, a cruel person, a prisoner, and imprisoned that ones that who was he exercised control essentially through fear. Now look at this here. Hell from beneath, verse 9. Hell from beneath is moved for thee to meet thee at thy coming. It stirs up the dead for thee, even all the chief ones of the earth. Okay, so he is talking about the chief ones of the earth. Why the chief ones of the earth? Why not the chief ones of the heavenlies? Because he was a chief ruler on the earth. That's why. It has raised up from their thrones all the kings of the nations. Which nations? The very nations that Lucifer controlled and ruled over, and with an absolute iron hand. All they speak and say unto thee, Art thou also become weak as we? See, once he had defeated the angels, he had basically become the absolute ruler, and he was held in great fear. His fear had spread, through the earth, and I'm sure through the heavens as well, because of what he had accomplished. All they shall speak and say unto thee, Art thou also become weak as we? Art thou become like unto us? Thy pomp is brought down to the grave. See, in the case of the anointed cherub, there's no such mention made that about a grave. He was brought down in ashes. Yes, the fire came out from the midst of him, but it doesn't say anything about him being buried in a grave, because angels are not buried in graves. Angels can be destroyed, yes, but they're not like, they don't have bodies that are going to rot as the bodies of people do. So thy pomp is brought down to the grave, and the noise of thy vials, the worm is spread under thee. So again, like if this king of Babylon is symbolic of Lucifer, then Lucifer was certainly a flesh and blood creature. He was not an angelic being. And that is what this is telling us here. The noise of thy vials, the worm is spread under thee. The worm spreads under the bodies that are laid in the ground, because it has to be a creature of a body first before these worms can be spread under them. And the worms cover thee. And the worms can only cover people that have bodies or have had existence in bodily form. Okay, now let's turn to verse 12. How art thou fallen from heaven, O Lucifer? Now let me just deal with this part here first. This clause in this term in this phrase in this sentence. How art thou fallen from heaven, O Lucifer? Now people say, they assume that this fall from heaven is from the heaven of God. However, in the Bible, the word heaven has different meanings. It means first of all, the sky that is above us, okay? This is called this is also called heaven. So when the Bible in Lucifer, in Isaiah chapter 14, verse 12, it tells us, How art thou fallen from heaven, O Lucifer? It does not mean that he was in the heaven of God, because we will read a couple of verses down that he said that he would ascend into heaven. So if he had already going to ascend into heaven, if he was already in heaven, he would not be trying to ascend into heaven. So this fall of Lucifer, it did not happen from the heaven or the place where God, which is the abode of God, and the place of the city of his kingdom, okay, from which he rules. That is not the place that this is talking about. This is talking about the heavens that are right above us. So Lucifer fell in his attempt in ascending up to heaven. He did not make it there, as we shall see. How art thou fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning? And this is where the authorized version of the Bible in the English language, it separates itself from all these other fraudulent and deceptive and corrupt translations that translate this as morning star. No, the term used here is son of the morning, and that is very, very, very significant. Now I have done many, 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 many videos on the identity of the sons of God in Genesis chapter 6 and the book of Job, and also on the study on the word son itself. The word son only applies to flesh and blood creatures. That's it. And now, not even so much as flesh and blood, but creatures that are corporeal, that are flesh. Okay? It does not apply to any spirit being like an angel. It doesn't. So when it tells us, how art thou fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning, it is not calling him a morning star, like, all these corrupt translations change that. No, it is saying son of the morning. So what it tells us is that Lucifer came about as a result. He was a son of somebody. He was born as a person. Angels are not born. Angels are created, but this person was born. Therefore, he is not an angel like the anointed cherub, it tells us was, okay? How art thou fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning? Now, in Greek mythology, there is a goddess called Eos. And, she is also worshipped in India by the name of Usha, okay, which means dawn. There was a goddess, and she had children. Two of her most famous children were Hesperus and Phosphorus. Phosphorus is this idea of light and illumination from both these sons that she had, Hesperus and Phosphorus. They are identified with the morning and with the evening. Okay, so and they are creatures of light. There is some sort of association of light or illumination with them, which is where this idea of Lucifer as the illuminated one comes from. He is most likely this mythological phosphorus. And even today, phosphorus is a chemical. It is something when you burn it, it produces light. And that is where most likely who this person was. This person, as we know, that in the beginning God created the angels. In Job 38:7 we read, when the sons of God, the morning stars sang together. In Job 38:7 we are told that before God made the earth, he had already made these other creatures called the morning stars, which are angels. And all the sons of God shouted for joy. The sons of God, contrary to popular opinion, and I'm repeating myself again and again and again, they were not angels. They were flesh and blood. They were corporeal creatures. So these corporeal creatures, they could procreate. They could reproduce. They could have children. Okay, this is where the stories of the gods of mythology, who all have children and grandchildren and generations, they come from, because yes, they did exist. Not in the days of Adam, but before Adam, long time before. So some of these stories have passed on down to us in mythological form. And one of these stories is of this goddess Eos, or Dawn, and her children. Okay, and one of those most prominent children is Phosphorus, and that is where we get this name Lucifer from. That's who he was. Okay, and he's called Son of the Morning. Then most likely he is a physical creature that was born of some woman, and that woman is most likely this woman that was worshipped as a goddess. In mythology, she's called Eos. Like I said, in India, she's called Usha, and everywhere they have this goddess who has these sons, and one of those sons is Phosphorus, which is like, of course, that's where the word light bearer comes from, because when phosphorus is lit, it creates light. So there was probably some sort of technological reference to this powers that this creature might have possessed, but I don't know why exactly, he was named Phosphorus, but he was. And that, in my opinion, is who this Lucifer was. The word Lucifer literally means shining one, which is why I suppose he has this affiliation. he was named Phosphorus because there was some sort of either some kind of technological, these gods, they had different technologies in their possession. So whatever it was that they possessed that made him have some sort of light bearer, they called the light bearer, there was some association with light, but that does not make him the morning star. Okay, so the morning star, even in Hebrew, the Hallel, the word, it means shining one. Okay, so shining one is obvious that it could come. The name phosphorus could imply something like that shines. Okay, so that name is okay. But to this association of Lucifer with the morning star, I believe is a deceptive one because in the Bible, Jesus is called the bright and morning star. And that, of course, is a deception that Satan has introduced a very long time ago, probably through Roman mythology, where these Roman poets like Ovid, they made this association of phosphorus with the morning star and Hesperus with the evening star Venus. But that, my friends, is not, in my strong belief, is not from the Bible. The Bible, the name is simply the shining one. But the fact that he's mentioned as a son, that immediately sets him apart from the anointed cherub, that he could not possibly have been an angelic being. How art thou fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning? How art thou cut down to the ground, which didst weaken the nations? When you cut something down to the ground, it is above the ground to begin with, right? So that's what happened. This creature, of course, like we read in mythology about all these, fantastic flying craft and everything else. So those existed back then, and I think he was using those to try and assault the heaven of God. And this, again, would not have been possible if that anointed cherub had still been ruling and in power. You see, because to get to God, he had to first get rid of that who controlled the heavenly realms in those days, in the gold and the silver age, and that would have been the anointed cherub. So that again lends credence to this belief that there was a war between these Luciferian men and these angels, and the Luciferians did defeat them. Let's call these Luciferians the Olympians. They did defeat the Titans, who were the angelic race, and they were imprisoned in hell. Now the way was clear for Lucifer to go to and be worshipped as God, just as that anointed cherub had been, and that's why he was attempting his assault on heaven, the city of God, and that's where he was cut down from. How art thou fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning? How art thou cut down to the ground, which didst weaken the nations? Okay, in here we are told, how art thou cut down to the ground? Okay, when do things get cut down to the ground? When they are close to the ground, right? And how do we know that this fall of Lucifer was not from the most highs abode in the city of heaven, but from somewhere above the surface of the earth? Because of the words and phrases that are used, such as in verse 14 it tells us, I will ascend above the height of the clouds. Clouds are generally close to the surface of the earth. They're not up where the heaven of God is. So if he is like around where the clouds are and above the ground somewhere, then it's natural that when he is cut down or he's shot down, like an aircraft would be, or an aircraft crashing to the ground, for example, it is going to come crashing down to the ground. So that's where we learn that, this theory that he was in heaven from which he was cast out, it does not work. He was from the earth trying to get up into heaven when he was cut down, and he came crashing down to earth. Furthermore, that we can also again conclude that he was an absolute ruler of all the nations, such as we read in verse 6 in chapter 14, that, he ruled the nations in anger. And again, we read in this same verse, in verse 12 in Isaiah 14, he did weaken the nations. So obviously he had power and control of the nations. He was, after the anointed cherub, the second one world ruler that we are expecting the Antichrist to be. See, again, nothing new under the sun. These things that have been will be again. And that spirit of Lucifer, the spirit of that fallen and anointed cherub angel, and are both still resident in Satan. So whatever they have done in the past, it is just being repeated in this time. But just as Lucifer was cast, as the anointed cherub was cast down, Just as Lucifer was cut down to the ground, the same fate awaits Satan, as Jesus forewarned us and foretold that, I beheld Satan as lightning falling from heaven. Three different people, three different times, same fate, however, same destiny. For thou hast said in thine heart. Now look at these words here. Look at each term that is, each phrase that is used here. For thou hast said in thine heart, I will ascend into heaven. So again, ask yourself this question. If he was already in heaven, why would he want to be ascending into heaven, right? I will ascend into heaven. I will exalt my throne above the stars of God. As we read just in a few verses before, that, he ruled the nations. So he'd already conquered the earth. He'd already conquered the heavenly realms where he had defeated these angelic race. So who else was left except God, right? That's it. And God allowed these things to happen because they served his purposes. That's why. He had to let evil grow and grow and grow and grow till it reached full age and full maturity, as I've told you. And therefore, he didn't stop him. When it is not difficult for God to stop anybody. He can wipe out all creation with like hitting a delete button on a computer. That's how easy it is for him. But if he has allowed these things to happen, it tells us, he suffered the vessels of wrath. These guys like Lucifer and the Holy Cherub, they of course were vessels of wrath, but with long suffering, with patience, God allowed these creatures to come into existence and to work their evil. He has, because it has served his purposes. For thou hast said in thine heart, I will ascend into heaven, I will exalt my throne above the stars of God. What are stars representative of? Stars are representative of angels, right? So we can read that in Revelation chapter 1, verse 20. This is Jesus speaking. He said, the mystery of the seven stars, which thou saw in my right hand. The seven stars are the angels of the seven churches. So stars in the Bible are symbolic of angels. And if Lucifer was going to ascend up into the heavens and set up his throne, which was obviously on the earth, above the stars of God, he would have to pass through the angelic realms, through the heavenly realms, which are, of course, the powers and the dominion of which has been given to the angels, beginning with the anointed cherub, who, of course, because of his evil, had already been cast down to hell. But the other angels of God, including Michael and such, they are still up in the heavenly realms. And to access God's throne, he would have to pass through these heavenly realms, pass through these hosts of heaven, which are the stars of God, which are the angels of God and his armies, and then he would have to conquer them. And it is, of course, something which he was not able to do, and which is why he was cast down. He was cut down to the ground in this attempt to pass through the heavenly realms to get up to the heaven, the city of God, to usurp God's throne upon which he had set his evil eyes. I will exalt my throne above the stars of God. I will sit up also upon the mount of the congregation, which is the holy mountain of God. This is the mount of congregation, right? And in the anointed cherub, what does God tell us about him? He already was in the mountain with God. And what does Lucifer want to do? He said, I will sit upon the mount of congregation. So is Lucifer on that mountain? No, he is not. So can they be the same person? One is already there. One wants to go there. So how can they be the same? Of course they are not. That is why there's so much confusion in the understanding of the history of evil, is because all these different persons and the events of these different ages, they're lumped together into one. And then, of course, all we are left with is false stories and false doctrines. I will sit also upon the mount of the congregation in the sides of the north. This is the sides of the north is also a very interesting reference, because in the celestial directions, due north, where you talk about the North Star, for example, is straight above us. Okay, it is not a horizontal direction; it's a vertical direction. Okay, that's due north. So this mount of the congregation, like I said, is somewhere in the heavenly realms above, and due south will be the bottom, which is the earth, and everything in between is east and west. So the celestial directions are a little bit different than what terrestrial directions are. So the sides of the north is right up, straight up there, okay? And that's where I believe it would be. And again, when you have these stories, they find these truths, they find their way into fiction. For example, the North Pole is a very revered place. Like in Norse mythology, they have, of course, Valhalla, okay, which is in the north. And even in like comic books, like in Superman, his fortress of solitude, which is a very technological, marvelous place, is at the North Pole or in the northern directions. So again, there is truth in these things here because the devil cannot create information. The only one that can create information is God. Everyone else can only twist information. Either they can believe the information as God gives it, or they can twist it and turn it into a lie. And that's what the devil does. So he makes up these stories based on truths. So this is a truth that there is this mountain congregation in somewhere up above us, because that is where north is. North is directly above us. And due north would be where the city of God would be above us. Okay, that's how these directions work, these celestial directions work. I will ascend above the heights of the clouds, verse 14. Now look at that again here. I will ascend above the heights of the clouds. So where do you find clouds? Okay, clouds are right above the earth, right? So where was his ascent going to begin from? If he has to go through the clouds, it has to be beginning on the earth, right? So where was this man, Lucifer? Where was he? Was he in heaven, like they tell us, that he walked with God? No, he was not. He was on the earth. He was a ruler on the earth. He had conquered the earth. He had conquered and defeated these angels. And that is the reason why now he thought that he had done it all, and the only one that stood in his way is God. I will ascend above the heights of the clouds. I will be like the Most High. Whereas that anointed cherub already has set his heart like God. I am a God, he had said. This creature, Lucifer, wanted to be like that Most High. He has seen it. He had existed in that silver age, at least. And maybe his origins go all the way back to the golden age. We don't know when he came into existence. Most likely in the silver age, okay? Or I would just like to take a minute to speculate about the timing of the birth of Lucifer. Now we understand from the order of creation that is written in the Bible that first of all God created the heaven, which is his own city from which he will rule and reign and rule over all creation. And then at some point in time later, after the heaven, he formed the earth. But before he formed the earth, he had made living creatures, intelligent beings already, all the races of angels as well as the races of the sons of God. And I say races because it was not just one pair of the sons of God that God made in the beginning, like Adam and Eve. The celestial men, the sons of God, they're celestial because they originated in heaven, not on the earth like Adam. There were more than one. I would speculate, based on years of study, and by comparing it to a study of the Bible and comparing it to the information that is such as in the stories of mythology, in fiction, fantasy fiction, etc., that God in the beginning made at least 6 pairs, male and female, of these sons of God. The sons of God could procreate and have offspring, which is a common story in amongst the gods of mythology, especially in Greek mythology, Hindu mythology, that these gods were able to have offspring, okay? So it was either 6 pairs or there were 12 pairs. And, if there were 12 pairs, that would make 24 of them. And that might have something to do with the 24 elders that sit around the throne of God. I do not believe any of those 24 elders are of the race of Adam. But, that is, again, more speculation on my part. But it is reason speculation. So, at some point in time, the original 6 or 12 pairs, they originated in heaven. Then they were moved to the earth. They were given the earth, which is why they shouted the earth. So they came down to the earth and they began to be fruitful and multiply, just like God told Adam to be. And they started having children and they populated the earth and they built worlds, these ancient worlds which are long gone now, although ruins of them still exist on the earth in many, many different places. So that this Lucifer, I believe, at some point in time, he was born much later after these original sons of God had been formed, had been created by God up in heaven. So I would tend to think that although he had an existence simultaneously with the anointed cherub and his angels, the fallen angels, they coexisted at some point in time and eventually clashed with each other, as did Satan. Satan came into existence as the serpentine dragon even after Lucifer had been born. Okay, so at some point in time, the third member of this evil trinity came into existence, which is Satan. But leaving that aside, I would speculate that Lucifer was born at some point in time in the Silver Age, because he was a son of one of these creatures who are worshipped as gods. Okay, so they had already set up these idolatrous worships. They had already begun to rebel against God. These, not just the angels, but these sons of God, some of them had joined them in their rebellion. And at this point in time, some point in time, I would say towards the latter part of the Silver Age, came this Lucifer, and he is the one who eventually overcame, first of all these other evil sons of God, these gods, and he defeated them. And he is, I will speculate, somebody like a Zeus of Greek mythology, that he became the chief god. And therefore, I do not think he existed in the Golden Age, but he was born at some point in time in the Silver Age. But he did coexist, and he did know this anointed cherub and the other fallen angels. Of that, I am certain. And he has seen that angel who had instituted and all these systems of commerce and buying and selling and trading and trafficking. He had built temples and sanctuaries. You can look up the meaning of the word sanctuaries in Ezekiel 28. It's a place, sanctified place, a place of worship. So if he has set up these sanctuaries, what were they for? For the worship of God? No, for his own worship. And Lucifer has seen all this. That's why I said this angel was the role model. This anointed cherub was the role model for Lucifer. And eventually, like I said, when the lust of power gets a hold of a person, even those that may have been their mentors or somebody that might have been admired, eventually, as the person grows in their own power and stature, they will have the desire to replace that very mentor and take their place. And that's what happened to Lucifer. He wanted to take over everything that this angel had. And when he had done so, that is when he wanted to go above that and be like the Most High. Everything that was higher than him, like the anointed cherub, he had already conquered. So what was left was the Most High. He was not like the Most High. He wanted to become that. He was not in heaven. He wanted to ascend there. Whereas, as I tell the cherubim, that anointed cherub, he walked in close proximity with God. He was constantly in the presence of God. Not so in the case of Lucifer. I will ascend above the heights of the clouds. I will be like the Most High. Yet thou shalt be brought down to hell, to the sides of the pit. I did a study on this on Apollo. In Revelation we read about the angel of the bottomless pit that shall ascend out of the bottomless pit. And that may be the spirit of Lucifer that is bound in that bottomless pit at the moment. As we can read here, yet you shall be brought down to hell, to the sides of the pit. Now look at this verse 16. As we read in Ezekiel 28, where God clearly identified that person as the anointed cherub or an angelic being, here God is going to clearly identify for us that Lucifer is and was a man. They that shall see thee, shall narrowly look upon thee and consider thee, saying, is this the man that made the earth to tremble, that did shake kingdoms? And people will say, oh no, this is speaking about Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon. Well, let's read on a little bit more, and then you shall see that this reference can only be to Lucifer himself and not to the king of Babylon, because what Lucifer is described as doing here, the king of Babylon did not do. They that see thee shall narrowly look upon thee and consider thee, saying, is this the man that made the earth to tremble, that did shake kingdoms, that made the world as a wilderness? Nebuchadnezzar was not a destroyer. He was a conqueror, yes, but he was a builder. When he was turned into a beast, literally, because he became so proud. What made him proud was that everything that he had built. He says, is this not the great Babylon that I have built? He did not turn the world into a wilderness. Okay? Who made the world into a wilderness? And that word wilderness is the very same word that is used in Jeremiah chapter 4, where we read, the cities, everything had become a wilderness because the Lord, and by his fierce anger, the cities had been broken down. Who did this destruction? It was Lucifer that made the world as a wilderness. Look at the terminology there. It doesn't talk about one little kingdom or one little nation. It's talking about the world as a wilderness. Because this man grew so mad that he became such a tyrant that he would go stomping around like a mad elephant, destroying everything in his path because he was so anxious to take it all. See, in those day and ages, there are certain things that are hidden from us. We can't see the city of heaven. We can't see exactly what is above us. We can't see what is below us, okay? But not so in those ages. Everything was open, okay? It was openly known and it was openly accessible. And that's what he wanted to do. And in order to do that, he had to destroy everybody that stood in his path to begin with. And that is what this made the world as a wilderness. Now, this is getting kind of long, so I'm not going to go and do this comparison to Jeremiah chapter 4, where that word wilderness, and to Genesis chapter 1, verse 2, how the world came to be without form and void. The earth came to be without form and void. It is because of what Lucifer did here. He is the one that turned the world into a wilderness. And that is again God using this very person again to bring judgment against all the others that had also turned to evil in that time, that made the world as a wilderness and destroyed the cities thereof. It actually may be good to just take a look at Jeremiah 4 quickly, okay? Because it talks about cities, about the world becoming a wilderness. And as I've told you in Jeremiah chapter 4, the description from verse 23 into 26, it is not about the flood of Noah, but it is about a time that existed, that happened in an age long gone. And if you're not seeing some of my videos on that, I would definitely recommend that you do, especially the one on the gap theory. But let's begin in verse 23 in Jeremiah quickly. I beheld the earth, and lo, it was without form and void, and the heavens, and they had no light. I beheld the mountains, and lo, they trembled, and all the hills moved lightly. I beheld, and lo, there was no man, and all the birds of the heavens were fled. See, this is when the destruction came about, not only of the earth, but also of the heavens, as we read about in the book of 2 Peter, chapter 3. I beheld, and lo, there was no man, and all the birds of the heavens were fled. And look at verse 26. I beheld, and lo, the fruitful place was a wilderness. Who turned it into a wilderness? Lucifer did. Lo, the fruitful place was a wilderness, and all the cities thereof were broken down. What did it say in Isaiah chapter 14 and verse 17? That made the world as a wilderness and destroyed the cities thereof. Okay? I beheld, in word Jeremiah 4:26, I beheld, and lo, the fruitful place was a wilderness, and all the cities thereof were broken down at the presence of the Lord and by his fierce anger. So, God used Lucifer to bring judgment upon that evil world of the Bronze Age. But you see, God used Lucifer, as we can read here in verse 17 in Isaiah 14, that made the world as a wilderness and destroyed the cities thereof, that opened not the house of his prisoners. So who did he take prisoners? Well, I'm sure many people, but he also took prisoner the angels, who are still locked away in hell, waiting the day of judgment. God used him to bring judgment upon the angels and upon that evil world, and in the process he destroyed Lucifer himself. So in regards to this Lucifer building prisons and imprisoning the angels, in Greek mythology, the story of the Titans who were locked away in Tartarus or hell, it is told that that prison was guarded by a dragon. And the dragon, of course, in the Bible is Satan. So I believe that in this age, which preceded the present Iron Age, which is the age of man, that Satan and Lucifer had some type of partnership at some point in time. And therefore, they were co-conspirators, you might say, that might have worked together to bring about the downfall of these angels. And I believe Satan and his dragon races and the other evil creatures that were manufactured in that time by both the angels and by Lucifer, they are the ones that fought these wars. For example, you read about the Hakontaries, or those those creatures with 50 heads and 100 arms and such things. These things, they did happen, they did exist. And but this idea of a dragon being the garden place to guard these angels in hell, it is interesting because this is where we will understand that when Satan came into existence, and also like what role he has played in these events of history, that is the events of prehistory that predate the present age of man, that began with Adam and Eve in the garden. All the kings of the nations, even all of them, lie in glory, everyone in his own house. But thou art cast out of thy grave. Who do we make graves for? We make them from men. This Lucifer was a man. But thou art cast out of thy grave like an abominable branch. Was Nebuchadnezzar cast out of his grave? No. No, he was not. He did not turn the world into a wilderness. He did not break all the cities of the world down. He built a lot more than he destroyed. But thou art cast out of thy grave like an abominable branch, and as the raiment of those that are slain, thrust through with a sword, that go down to the stones of the pit as a carcass. Who has a carcass? Corporeal creatures, flesh and blood beings. That's what a carcass is, a body. So this was a creature of a body, not an angel. That go down to the stones of the pit as a carcass trodden under feet. Thou shalt not be joined with them in burial. Who do we bury? Do we bury men or do we bury angels? Of course we bury men. This Lucifer was a man. Thou shalt not be joined. This again proves that these sons of God were men. That these worlds that existed in the past before Adam was made were built by men. Okay, they were built by flesh and blood creatures. Some of them were giants, very big in stature. Some were maybe the same stature as ourselves in this age. But they did exist. Those worlds, they did exist. Those ages, they did exist. It is in the Bible. Read it. Okay? Thou shalt not be joined with them in burial, because thou hast destroyed thy land. And again, Nebuchadnezzar did not destroy his land. He became proud because he had built so much, not destroyed it. Therefore, this story, although compared to the king of Babylon, it is not just about this king, Nebuchadnezzar. Nebuchadnezzar, as a matter of fact, at the end of his life, he did repent and he did humble himself and he did become a believer in God, okay? However, some of his progeny, and especially the last king of Babylon, Belshazzar, they were wicked, no doubt about that. But all the things that are written about here in Isaiah 14 do not even apply to Belshazzar, because he certainly did not destroy his land. He was a glutton and a winebibber, as the Bible calls you. He was a party animal. But he was not like a conqueror like his father Nebuchadnezzar has been. He was just, one of this happens with the generation, the second or third generation, after a father or a grandfather builds a lot of wealth, then the third, fourth generation begins to destroy it. And that's what happened with Belshazzar, who was killed by the Persians. But still, like I said, all the events that are written about in Isaiah 14, they applied to none of the Babylonian kings, only partially perhaps, but they all apply to Lucifer, who was a son of God man who existed in the age that came before the age of Adam. So although the king of Tyre in Ezekiel 28 and the king of Babylon in Isaiah chapter 14 are compared to these two grandfather and father of evil, the anointed cherub and Lucifer, yet all of the deeds that are recorded in both these chapters, they do not apply just to human persons, but they do apply to the angelic being and then to another person who is Lucifer, who did not live in the days of Nebuchadnezzar the king or in the days of Daniel the prophet. But these events that are being described here, they must indeed have occurred a long, long, long time before there was any Babylon here on this earth in this age, which is the age of Adam and his children. No, this is a much more ancient story about this person, that is Lucifer, who was also a man. Thou shalt not be joined with them in burial, because thou hast destroyed thy land and slain thy people. And again, though Nebuchadnezzar was a conqueror, he was not slayer of his own people. The seed, now look at this word here, the seed of evildoers. See, Lucifer was a seed of somebody. Like I told you, he was a seed of this woman called the goddess Eos. So again, in regard to the anointed chair of God, clearly said from the day thou wast created, that he was like all angels are created. They're not born. They don't have seed. They don't procreate. God creates each individual angel himself, as it is said of the anointed cherub very, very clearly in Ezekiel 28. Therefore, that is again another substantial difference, that in regards to Lucifer, we read about him being a son, we read about seed in this chapter, and him being on the earth, him being laid in the grave, etc., which applies to flesh and blood creatures. So once again, these are very, very solid proofs in the Bible that that angel and the Lucifer, they are not the same person. And of course, their history, although it may overlap, it is not contemporaneous with each other all throughout. Okay, the anointed cherub came first, then came a Lucifer at some point later. They might have had, like I said, an overlapping existence for a season, but then Lucifer continued and this anointed cherub was locked away. Different people, different times, different ages. I hope that becomes clear by now that the Bible does not teach that Lucifer was an angel. And these children, in turn, were called the seed of evildoers. The seed of evildoers. Why does it use that term here? Because Lucifer was the seed of somebody that was an evildoer. The seed of evildoers shall never be renowned. That, my friends, is the complete story of Lucifer. And this has been a long presentation, but this information is deep, and therefore, we need to dig deep into it. We need to go right down to take for, as we do for hidden treasures, because these are treasures that are buried in the Word of God. Understanding of this past history, it is going to bring us eventually the understanding of our God. What was He doing? Why did these things happen? What purpose did this serve? And when we begin to see all that, and the mists begin to clear, and like the day star begins to rise in our hearts, then it puts us in awe. Then, you don't have to force yourself, or should I, go down on my knees? You automatically fall down on your knees because you are in the presence of such majesty, such wisdom, such knowledge that God is, that you can't help but be awed by it, as I am. So I will close off here by mentioning that on my YouTube channel, I do have a playlist called Bible History of Creation, in which there are well over 100 teachings. Some of them are very old, and I'm taking those and I'm revising them and updating them, as for example in this videos on the history of evil, with the 3 different creatures and the ages of evil that have gone by. And I have done many, many videos on the identity of Lucifer and of the sons of God. They are all in that playlist. I will put a link to the playlist in the description. So whoever was interested in this topic about the history of the real history of creation, they should really explore and study them, and it is going to give them literally years worth of study to do. So thank you for listening. This is Paul Sandhu.